The campus of Bright Future University was always buzzing with life. Students walked in groups, chatting, laughing, and planning their next weekend outings. Among them was Amaka, a quiet but strikingly beautiful young woman. She had smooth caramel skin, deep brown eyes that held wisdom beyond her years, and full lips that rarely spoke unless necessary. She was in her third year of business administration, but unlike most of her peers, she had no interest in wild parties, alcohol, or campus relationships. This made her an easy target. Her so-called friends, Ada, Blessing, and Tolu, were the opposite. They lived for campus gossip, extravagant outings, and attention from boys. They had tolerated Amaka for a while, hoping she would eventually loosen up and join them. But when she continued turning down their invitations to bars and club nights, Ada in particular became annoyed. "She always acts like she's better than us," Ada hissed one afternoon as they sat under the large mango tree outside their faculty building. Blessing, who was always the peacemaker, shrugged. "Maybe she's just different. Not everyone likes to party." "She's forming different for nothing," Ada scoffed. "She thinks she's special? If she won't enjoy life, we'll make life enjoy her." Her words held a dangerous edge, but the others only laughed, thinking it was another of Ada's dramatic statements. But Ada was dead serious. A few days later, Ada noticed something interesting. One of her male friends, Kelvin, had been watching Amaka for weeks. He was one of the most popular boys on campus. Tall, light-skinned, and charming. He had money, cars, and influence. Everything girls usually wanted, but Amaka never gave him a second glance. That bruised his ego. "She'd a form hard to get," Kelvin complained one evening when Ada teased him about it. Ada saw an opportunity. "You want to know why she's forming?" she whispered, leaning in like she was about to reveal a deep secret. "That girl no be saint. She just a do holy. I'm sure she has secrets." Kelvin raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" Ada smirked. "Let's find out." She then convinced Kelvin and two of his friends, Sammy and Patrick, to test Amaka. At first, Kelvin hesitated, but Ada knew how to push his buttons. "Are you scared?" she taunted. "Or maybe you're just not man enough to handle her." That was all it took. Kelvin's pride was too big for him to back down now. That Friday, Amaka was in her hostel, sitting at her small wooden desk, reading a novel. She was alone. Her roommate had gone home for the weekend. The evening was quiet, with only the faint noise of distant music from another block. Then came the knock. At first, she ignored it. It was late, almost 9:30 p.m. The knock came again, louder, more urgent. Cautiously, she stood up and walked to the door. "Who is it?" she called out. "It's Ada," a familiar voice answered. Amaka frowned. What was Ada doing at her hostel at this time? Still, she unbolted the door. The moment she opened it, Ada shoved her way inside, followed by three guys. The air in the small room suddenly felt thick with tension. Amaka took an instinctive step back. "What's going on?" Ada smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "Nothing, babe. Just wanted to introduce you to my friends properly." Amaka's eyes darted to Kelvin, Sammy, and Patrick. She recognized Kelvin. Everyone on campus did, but the way they watched her made her stomach twist with unease. "I think you should leave," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Kelvin chuckled. "Relax, Amaka. We just want to have a little fun." Amaka's heart pounded. The door was blocked. There was no way out. She tried to run, but Ada pushed her back. That was when she realized this wasn't a joke. This was a trap, and she was completely alone. Amaka's breath came in short, panicked gasps as her back hit the wooden wardrobe in her tiny hostel room. The space felt smaller, suffocating, as she stared at the four figures standing between her and the only exit. Kelvin took a slow step forward, his hands casually in his pockets. He looked too relaxed, too sure of himself. "Why are you acting like this, Amaka?" he said smoothly. "We just want to have fun." Amaka's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the wardrobe. "I said leave." Ada rolled her eyes, moving toward the door like she was going to leave. For a second, Amaka thought she had changed her mind. Then she did the worst thing possible. She reached for the key in the door and locked it from inside. Amaka's stomach dropped. She turned to Ada, pleading with her eyes. "Please don't do this." Ada only smiled, a slow, wicked smile. "I told you, Amaka," she whispered, tilting her head. "You think you're better than us? Let's see how special you are now." Then she tossed the key to Kelvin. Amaka screamed. She tried to run past them, but Sammy grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful. She kicked, scratched, fought, but there were too many of them. "Leave me alone, please," she sobbed, struggling against their hold. Kelvin laughed. "You hear that?" He looked at his friends. "She's begging." Patrick snorted. "They always do." Amaka felt her heart break. How could they be so cruel? Her strength gave out as Kelvin pushed her onto the bed. She stared at the ceiling, tears blurring her vision, her mind racing. "No," she pleaded again, her voice breaking. "Please, I have HIV." Kelvin froze for half a second, but then Ada laughed. "Lie. If she had HIV, she would have told people before now." Amaka shook her head violently, her body trembling. "It's true." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Kelvin shrugged. "Well, too late now." And then it happened, one after the other. Pain, shame, darkness. Amaka left her body. She stopped fighting, stopped struggling. She let herself float away. She didn't know how long it lasted. By the time she opened her eyes, they were gone. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of crickets outside. Her body felt broken. Her bedsheet was stained. Her spirit was shattered. Ada had unlocked the door before leaving. She was part of it. She planned this. Amaka curled into herself, wrapping her arms around her body, as if she could hold herself together. The tears wouldn't stop. She wanted to scream, but who would listen? She wanted to run, but where would she go? She wanted to die. But then, a thought hit her. They don't know. They thought they won. They thought they could walk away without consequences. They didn't realize what they had just done. They had just destroyed themselves, and they didn't even know it yet. Days passed. Amaka didn't leave her hostel. She couldn't. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, numb. The pain in her body had faded, but the shame, the anger, the helplessness, those refused to leave. She ignored calls, texts, and knocks on her door. Her roommates had returned, whispering about how quiet she had become. They assumed she was just going through something. They had no idea. But the worst part? Ada and her friends were still living their normal lives. She heard them outside sometimes, laughing, gossiping, moving on, as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't dying inside. But something was coming for them, and it had already begun. A week after the incident, Kelvin woke up with a fever. His body felt weak, his throat dry, his head pounding like a drum. "Guy, you sure say you no get malaria?" Sammy asked as Kelvin sat on his bed, rubbing his temples. Kelvin waved him off. "I go buy drugs later." But it got worse. By the second week, Kelvin noticed something strange. His joints ached. He felt tired all the time, and even small injuries took longer to heal. At first, he thought it was stress, until he noticed the rashes. Small, red, itchy bumps started appearing on his arms. He scratched at them, but they didn't go away. Then came the night sweats. Every morning he woke up drenched, his bedsheets soaked. The fear started creeping in, and then it hit him. I have HIV." The word slammed into his chest like a bullet. He thought about Amaka's words that night. "I have HIV. I was born with it." At the time, he had laughed. Now he couldn't breathe. Kelvin rushed to the campus clinic the next morning. He barely spoke to anyone as the nurse collected his blood sample. The waiting was the worst part. He sat in the chair, tapping his foot rapidly, his mind racing. Maybe I'm just overthinking. Maybe it's just malaria. Maybe... The doctor returned with a white envelope. His face was unreadable. Kelvin's hands trembled as he opened it. The words jumped at him like fire. HIV positive. His breath caught in his throat. Everything around him became a blur. The doctor was talking, but Kelvin couldn't hear him. He grabbed his phone, dialed Sammy and Patrick. "Guy, you need to go for a test," he said, his voice shaking. "Why?" Patrick asked, confused. Kelvin swallowed, his throat dry. Because we're all positive. Silence. Then, a drop call. They were in shock, the same way Kelvin had been. Patrick was the first to react violently. "I swear I go kill that girl," he yelled. Sammy was pacing the room, his face pale. "How we take no, say, na she give us." Kelvin sat in the corner, silent. He already knew, and he was scared. But Patrick didn't care about proof. "If we're going down, someone is going down with us." He grabbed his phone and called Ada. Ada was in her room doing her makeup when she heard the loud banging on her door. She frowned, irritated. "Who is that?" "Open the door." It was Patrick, and he sounded angry. Confused, Ada walked to the door and unlocked it. Before she could react, Patrick, Sammy, and Kelvin pushed inside. Her stomach dropped. The look in their eyes was deadly. What's wrong?" she asked, stepping back. Kelvin's face was cold, unreadable. Patrick's, however, was pure rage. "You want to know what's wrong?" he hissed. "You set us up." Ada's heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" Patrick pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and threw it at her. She looked down. HIV positive. Her blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. She looked at Kelvin, but his eyes told her everything. And now they were out for blood. Ada took a step back, but she was too late. The door slammed shut behind her, and then everything went dark. The next morning, whispers spread across campus. "Ada didn't come out of her hostel last night. Did you hear? She looked terrified when she was last seen. 3 guys were with her. Something happened." But no one knew the full truth. Not yet. And while Ada battled her own nightmare, Amaka was about to face an unexpected truth, one that would change her life forever. Ada woke up in pain. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and her arms felt weak. As she opened her eyes, she realized she was lying on the floor of her hostel room, the morning light spilling in through the window. Memories of the previous night came rushing back. Patrick, Kelvin, Sammy, their rage, their hands pinning her down. She gasped, scrambling to sit up. Her heart pounded. She had been raped. Tears filled her eyes as she pulled her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. This can't be happening. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. But it had, and deep down she knew why. She had helped destroy Amaka's life, and now she was living the same nightmare. She had been punished with the same fate. Far from the chaos at the university, Amaka was beginning a new journey. After the assault, she had left school, disappearing to her aunt's house in Enugu. She had refused to speak about what happened, refused to answer her phone, refused to return. She spent weeks in silence, only leaving her room when necessary. Then, one morning, she felt sick. It started with morning nausea, followed by extreme fatigue. At first, she thought it was stress, until she missed her period. The realization struck her like lightning. It's not possible. She tried to ignore it, but when the sickness continued, she knew she had to face the truth. She went to the clinic for a test. 30 minutes later, the nurse handed her the results. Pregnant. Amaka stared at the paper, her heartbeat ringing in her ears. She should have felt anger, shame, hatred, but instead, she felt something else. "I'm going to have a baby." For the first time since the incident, she smiled. She didn't want the rape, she didn't want the pain, but she wanted this child. This was her chance to have a baby without infecting anyone. For the first time in months, she had hope. Back at the university, Ada was fighting her own battle. After what happened, she had rushed to the clinic, begging for post-exposure prophylaxis, PEP, the drug that prevents HIV infection if taken early enough. But the nurse's face was grim. "You were supposed to take it within 72 hours, she said gently. "It's been longer than that." Ada's legs weakened. Her hands shook. No, she whispered. I can't have it. I can't." But she knew the truth. She had helped Kelvin and his friends destroy Amaka's life. Now hers was ruined too. 9 months later, Amaka sat in a hospital bed, cradling her newborn son in her arms. She had taken every precaution the doctors advised. They had given her special medication and ensured the baby was delivered without exposure. The doctor entered the room with a gentle smile. "Amaka," she said, Your son's test results are back." Amaka's breath caught in her throat. The doctor sat beside her and held her hand. "He's HIV negative." Tears streamed down Amaka's face. She looked down at her baby, kissing his tiny forehead. "You're safe." For the first time in years, she felt free. Months later, Amaka returned to the university. But this time, she wasn't alone. She walked in with police officers, carrying a case file filled with evidence. She had come for justice. Before anyone could answer, there was a loud knock on the door. Patrick's heart skipped. Another knock, harder, angrier. "This is the police! Open up immediately!" Their stomachs dropped. Sammy jumped to his feet. "Guy, what do we do?" Kelvin barely had time to react before the door burst open, and uniformed police officers stormed inside. "You are under arrest for rape, sexual assault, and intentional transmission of HIV, an officer announced. Patrick tried to run, but two officers grabbed him. Kelvin and Sammy didn't even try to fight. They knew. They were finished. Across campus, Ada was in class, pretending everything was normal. She could still hear the whispers behind her back. "That's the girl who set Amaka up. I heard she's sick too. She ruined her own life." She ignored them. She had spent months suffering, denying the truth, but none of it mattered anymore. She had to move on. Then, a tap on her shoulder. She turned. A police officer stood over her desk. "Ada Obi?" Her heart stopped. "Yes? You are under arrest for complicity in sexual assault and aiding a crime. Stand up." The entire lecture hall went silent. Ada shook her head. "What? No, you don't understand." But the officer grabbed her wrist and snapped handcuffs around it. Ada screamed. Students watched in stunned silence as she was dragged out of the hall, her cries echoing down the corridor. Her life was over. From a distance, Amaka watched it all. She stood near the school gate, her baby strapped to her back, as she saw Kelvin, Patrick, Sammy, and Ada being led into a police van. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched, holding her child close. They took everything from me. But in the end, they lost more. The baby in her arms stirred. She looked down and kissed his forehead gently. "And I gained something they never will. Hope." With one final glance at her past, Amaka turned away. She had gotten her justice. Now it was time to live her life. The end. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. For more captivating tales, be sure to subscribe to my channel, African Folktales by Shully. Stay tuned for more stories that inspire, entertain, and bring our rich heritage to life.